Let's go to Jacob Rees-Mogg then. Good morning to you, Jacob.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Well, we are, as I say, we're hoping to get the explanation first from Dominic Grieve about why they want to push this motion. Why do you think they are pushing this motion? Why do you think they want to test the waters?
Well, the motion itself isn't that important. It's a backbench business motion, and I very much doubt there'll be a proper vote on it because it's a one-line whip and it isn't being fought by the government. So next week is essentially a take-note issue. It's a day of chatting. But why is this going on? It's because people want to stop Brexit. The customs union is a means of trying to stop Brexit happening. Keep us in the customs union, keep EU tariffs, keep close alignment with regulations. It means we don't really leave. And you saw this in the House of Lords. You saw peers receiving large pensions from the European Union voting to protect their vested interests.
You're talking of the likes of Chris Patton, of course, former
Very
EU
much so, who
commissioner.
gets a healthy EU pension.
Look, there are a lot of people who say, look, we want tariff-free access to the European Union. So what's wrong with remaining in? People talk about a customs union as opposed to the customs union. Do you think that's not possible?
Tariff-free access is different from a customs union. That's a free trade agreement. If you take the agreement just done with Canada, the CETA agreement, that's about free trade. That's about removing tariffs and obstacles to trade. Everybody's in favour of that. A customs union means that you then have a united front against the rest of the world. So it's Europe against the rest of the world. It's about maintaining tariff barriers against the rest of the world, making goods coming from other countries more expensive. And that's hugely the disadvantage of the poorest in our society because the biggest tariffs fall on food, clothing and footwear. And those are areas where people with the lowest incomes spend the highest proportion of their disposable income, and so you just lower their standard of living. So being in the customs union or a customs union actually takes away the advantages of leaving. So it's about keeping us de facto in the European Union.
So if next week's vote isn't binding, but there could be future votes in which a lot of the same MPs would actually vote against the government and try to keep us in the customs union, you're saying that wouldn't be Brexit? In which case, what does the government do?
Well, it depends what the motions say precisely. The House of Lords motion doesn't keep the country in a customs union because even the House of Lords, even the most pro-European lords receiving the largest pensions, can't make the European Union, the counterparty to these negotiations, agree to something. So all they're able to say in their motion is effectively that there will be a report on how the country could stay in a customs union. It's not actually a binding piece of legislation to keep us in a customs union because it can't, because it takes two to tango, and they can't legislate for what the EU may agree.
Now, there have been some interesting polls out suggesting that the majority of people in this country, if we have, when we have left the EU after 2020, would they vote to return to the EU? And even a majority of Remain voters say they would not. Do you think that the polls, the general attitude of the public is moving towards the Brexiteer argument or towards the Remain argument? Because there's a lot of concern that, if there are more pushes for a second referendum or a referendum on the vote that's offered by the EU, that Brexit could fall right by the wayside.
I think a second referendum is unnecessary, but if we had one, I think it would be a vote on democracy, not a vote on the European Union. It would be about whether we actually respect decisions that have already been taken, or whether we would be like Ireland and Denmark, a smaller European nation that gets bullied into holding a second vote. But I think what you're saying about the polls is really interesting because consistently polls have shown that 60 to 70% of people have accepted the result and want us to get on with it. There are a few cave dwellers in the House of Lords who are committed to opposing Brexit altogether, who want to keep us in, who never liked the vote to leave, who are contemptuous of democracy. And they are increasingly out of touch with the mood of the British people. And it is the peers against the people, and ultimately the people will win.
Waiting on the line, Dominic Grieve, Conservative MP for Beaconsfield, he's a QC, and also a former Attorney General. Dominic, thank you very much. Glad we got you on the line. Apologies, we were going to come to you first. I wanted to ask you, as one of the senior MPs who are calling for this vote next week, what do you hope to achieve with this vote about Britain remaining in a customs union after Brexit?
It's absolutely essential for the economic well-being of the United Kingdom that we should have frictionless trade with our EU partners. And the reality is that the chances of obtaining frictionless trade without staying in some form of customs union with our EU partners is very unlikely. So pushing for a customs union or a form of customs arrangement, which the Prime Minister herself talks about, is essential. Now, I listened carefully to Jacob, and I disagree fundamentally with him.
You surprised me.
He characterises a customs union as being a series of tariff barriers against the outside world. But we have tariff barriers against the outside world even after we've left the EU. Free trade agreements are designed to break those down. A customs union simply means that you do those free trade agreements collectively with your EU partners, and that within the EU itself or the EU area, you are operating a free trade system,
but of
which
course,
is immeasurably advantageous to our country.
well, apart from the fact that a lot of those tariffs are there to protect industries that are particularly dominant in some of those other EU countries, and actually mean that our own consumers have to pay more because of those tariffs for some fundamental goods, as Jacob Rees said.
I fundamentally disagree. If we leave the EU, the cost of living and particularly the cost of food is going to go up. And it's particularly going to go up for everybody in this country if we do not have a frictionless trade arrangement.
But everybody, surely everybody on all sides wants to have a free trade with the EU and frictionless as possible. But once you have when you say a customs union, I'm not quite sure what customs union it would be other than the customs union. You do have to impose those tariffs on the outside world.
The customs union is linked to EU membership. Clearly, if we're not in the EU, we will have to be in a customs union with the EU if we wish to have frictionless trade. It will not be full participation in the current EU customs union. That's fairly apparent. But it is essential that we should have a frictionless trade arrangement. Now, I'm perfectly happy for the Prime Minister to look at various options. But the bottom line for me, and I think a vast majority of members of Parliament in the House of Commons, is that, if necessary, we consider that it's in the national interest that we should be in a customs union with our EU partners. And the debate that's going to come this week, I agree with Jacob about this. It is an indicative debate. It doesn't force the government to do anything. But I think it provides an opportunity to highlight what the mood of the House of Commons is on this subject.
But again, you talk about the mood.
Jacob is likely to find that there is a majority of parliamentarians in favour of such a customs union, if that's necessary for a frictionless arrangement for trade.
But you talk about the mood of the House of Commons, and we've obviously had a test of the mood of the House of Lords this week at that vote on Wednesday. But shouldn't this all be about the mood of the British people? And we know what the mood of the British people was and is. We had a big referendum to find out. Is it not right, as Jacob Rees-Mogg said, that this is just a move by a bunch of not just Remainers but Remoaners to try and stop Brexit?
Not at all. The difficulty with the referendum was that the referendum provided a clear indication that there was a small majority of people in the United Kingdom, but necessarily a significant one, who wanted to leave the EU. They never specified, and the referendum never enabled us to specify what the future relationship should be. And I simply gently point out to people like Jacob that his views appear to be at serious variance with that, in fact, of the Cabinet, because the Cabinet and the Prime Minister's made fairly clear that she considers that frictionless trade with the EU is a really high priority for her government. It doesn't appear to be quite such a high priority for Jacob. My view is that we have to be realistic about this. And this debate will provide an opportunity for the House of Commons, I might add, forget about the House of Lords for a moment, to indicate its view on the importance of such an arrangement, or indeed a customs union with the EU to maintain that frictionless trade.
Dominic Grieve, QC, former Attorney General, Conservative MP, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Appreciate that. Glad we got that line to work. The time is 8:20. Let's get an update on the travel here at Talk Radio.